Oh, yes, guy. Hour number 2 of Overdrive and Mail It In Friday. Jim, Tatti, and Dave Feschuk with you. Getting set for Keegan Matheson very shortly to talk some baseball. Later on, top of the next hour, Rich Griffin, the veteran Blue Jay reporter, former Toronto Star columnist, former Jays Expos front office type, will be by to add his expertise to the Blue Jay run as well. Overdrive is brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score on Mail It In Friday. And we'll get into the Mail It In Friday sponsorship very shortly. So here we go. Baseball. Fasten your seatbelts. Stretch drive.
It's a fun time, man. It's exciting. I think baseball, because the Blue Jays are a good team again, because Ohtani is the story of sports right now.
Sports business.
And sports business.
Yeah.
In North America and in Japan, obviously. It's a lot of fun. Like, there's a lot to talk about with baseball. There's a lot to be excited about with baseball. And it's just, as you say, the stretch drive's just getting started.
What would you do if you're an Angels fan and Ohtani gets shifted out? Obviously, you'd look at the return, but I mean, that's a line in the sand, isn't it, for a fan?
Oh, you got to feel for the Angels fans. You've been feeling for them for a long time.
Yeah,
it's been a long time since they've been any good, and just when you think they should be good, it seems like all the pieces should be there. Alek Manoah seems like an enthusiastic guy who wants to do the right thing, who's the owner there. You've had Mike Trout for his entire career. You've had Ohtani for these few years, and yet you just can't make it happen. It's just, and this year, I guess you can make a case that it's more about bad fortune than a bad organization, but they're short on pitching any way you look at it outside of Ohtani. And the injury to Trout obviously only magnifies the fact that they're short on depth in general.
Yeah, you'd love to be a fly on the wall in certain front offices. And in the Angels' case, when they realized exactly what they had with Ohtani, which was probably his second or third game.
Yeah.
You look down and you go, whoa, what do we do with that? Nobody's ever had that issue before.
Yeah, you're right. It's such a one-off. And I think one of the most intriguing questions in sports that is impossible to answer right now, but will be fun to look back on in a generation is, what will the effect of this guy be? Will it just be he's a one-off unicorn, never to be repeated, or will he, because kind of like, they always say Roger Bannister broke the 4-minute mile, and then suddenly a bunch of people started running 4-minute miles, right?
Well,
and now the 4-minute mile,
something to aim at.
And once you realize it's possible as a human species, suddenly the good athletes start saying, yeah, I can do that too. And I wonder how many of the good athletes who are the best player on their, minor baseball team, and they can be the best pitcher and the best hitter, because that's pretty common when I've been around minor baseball my whole life, and yeah, the best player on the team is generally the shortstop. He also pitches, and he's the best hitter, right?
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, that never is carried up to the major leagues, right? Like, there's always this feeling that that's got to end at some point. Like, it's just too tough to do it all. You can't be a good hitter and a good pitcher, let alone a good fielder. And
or why would you want to do that? Well,
or why would you want to do it? And if you're going to make it, you better specialize. And there are still people, the incredible baseball people, that'll tell you that Ohtani's going to have to pick at some point, because he's going to turn 30 shortly and won't be able to do this into his 30s.
Right.
Which may be true. Who knows? But I just think it would be exciting to see if there are other players who try this.
Well, I mean, they've got the video there, so they know they know how it's done, as opposed to how he came up with this. Joining us in the Maple Toyota Hotline is Keegan Matheson, MLB.com Blue Jays reporter. And Keegan, welcome in. We're going to dive in. We're going to just sort of continue on that Ohtani thought before we get into specifically with the Jays. But where do you think this goes? I've been trying to sell this as it's not just a baseball story. This is a sports business opportunity for him and the team that eventually signs him that could take this to a level that nobody's seen before in Major League Baseball. Where are you on all that?
Hey, guys, I agree completely. This is the most interesting free agency we have seen in ages in Major League Baseball, maybe ever, because you are dealing with someone who is not just the best player in the league, but someone who is a marketing powerhouse. You need to consider how much money that will bring in, how many tickets that will sell, what that will do for your television rights, and the money involved not just in North America, but in Japan as well. There is so much that goes into having Shohei Ohtani on your team. And there's a lot of money that goes into that. Ideally, the next team won't screw it up like the Angels have over years, having the best talents in the league. But man, oh man, when you picture Shohei Ohtani in an LA or in a New York on a good team, that is a scary thing, and there's a lot of money involved.
Hey, Keegan, when you look at the trade deadline, there's always this feeling that you don't want to spend too much if you're a contender on essential rentals, right? If impending free agents, it's a risky business to go out and break the bank on a guy that you're only going to have for one playoff run guaranteed. But is Ohtani an exception to the rule, given the enormity of his talent and the fact that if you can get a leg up in any way on signing him by, say, winning a World Series with him on your roster, then you might as well take that gamble?
Yeah, he's two players. He is two major additions if you can pull that off and if they trade him. Now, will they? We'll see. I think if you are the GM and owner who trades Ohtani, nobody's going to remember your record or the context at the time. You're just going to be remembered as the guy who traded Shohei Ohtani. It's tough. I hope a move happens, though, because that would be fascinating. And this is a guy you go all in on. You trade anybody you can, and that can be scary. But what I always suggest to people is to go back and look at your favorite team's top prospects from 2011, from 2008. There are going to be guys you have forgotten about completely. This is how prospects work, and eventually one will come back and bite you. That will happen. But more often than not, 5 years from now, you'll look back and say, okay, not as scary as we thought.
If you're the Angels, I mean, oddly enough, you couldn't do it with Ohtani and other star players. The return should be at a level that you could actually be a better team, if that makes any kind of sense. And so what would you be looking to get back? I mean, obviously a lot of prospects, but this is a rare opportunity to almost kickstart a rebuild.
Yeah, that would be a franchise-altering, like we have not seen in a long time, opportunity. You would be asking for the other team's number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 prospect. You would be asking for a few more prospects. And depending on the team, I think you would also be asking for maybe a young MLB-level star who is already near or at the big league level and producing. Someone who isn't as much of a dice roll. Someone who has maybe had a bit of success, at least in AAA, getting to the big leagues, so you can bet on this. But the starting price point is everything, and I think you come down from that just a little bit.
So, Keegan, on to the Blue Jays now. They're at home for a set with the Arizona Diamondbacks to come out of the AllStar break. The rotation's been set, at least the first 3 starters, with Barrios, Gausman, Kikuchi. Any insight into why they just didn't start with Gausman, who's clearly been their best guy?
Yeah, beyond that, it's going to go Bassett, Manoah as well coming into that next series. So an interesting setup. The Blue Jays factoring in workload and matchups is what we were told going into this. So I think a lot of this has to do with not just the first series, but who does that make them face in the next series, How does that line them up against the Padres, against the Dodgers eventually? And a bit lower down, I think, makes a bit of sense separating Manoah and Kikuchi. They have been the two who have had some shorter outings along the way. Now, I'm in favor of seeing as much Kevin Gausman pitching as you can possibly get. He has been incredible this year, much better than I think his ERA even says again in 2023. But they'll roll with Barrios to start, and I think they like that long-term, how it lines up. But, man, oh, man, those guys were, I think, thankful for the breather after running that 4-man for a while.
Okay, let's go a little deeper on Manoah. I mean, it seemed to me, and they've sort of mapped it out this way, they have to sort of protect his starts. What is the team saying about him? What is the confidence level? I mean, where is this story?
So the team is saying they're very confident in Manoah right now, that he has checked off everything they need. Now, we saw a little bit of that in reality last week against the Tigers. Detroit is not a good lineup, not a good team, but it's the big leagues. Manoah came in and looked good. Up until then, we had been told that everything looks good, ignore those minor league stat lines. He's doing everything that we want to see that the Blue Jays have laid out. They were feeling good about the process and the results and all of these buzzwords. You need to see it at the big league level, though, and you need to see it consistently. And I almost look at Manoah in these next few weeks like a top young prospect coming up. Now, he's had success, deserves respect for that, but a young prospect in terms of great, you've done it once, Let's see it a second time, a third time, a fourth time, as other teams adjust to you. Are you going to be adjustment-proof? Are you going to make that adjustment before they make theirs? That's where this gets important. So Detroit was a good start, but Detroit is Detroit. We will see how this goes against some stronger lineups.
You saw in the All-Star game, Keegan, that Jordan Romano, Toronto's best guy out of the bullpen, tweaked the lower back injury or back tightness, if you don't want to call it an injury. Any update on his status today?
Yeah, Romano was going to throw here shortly. I'm just looking down over onto the field, off of the mound here shortly before the game. They say it is not a bad thing right now. He's feeling better than he expected to. Could be available tonight. If he needs one more day, that's okay. Fresh bullpen. But at the time, didn't look too bad. I never want to read too much into Romano's facial expressions because he is maybe the most laid-back and relaxed man I've ever met. So I don't think he would have reacted too strongly on the field. But everything sounds good there. And at worst, sounds like it might just be another day or two to get comfortable here after he throws.
You spoke with manager Schneider about an hour ago. What did he offer up?
In terms of Romano?
Whatever he talked about.
Everything else. Now, he's feeling good going into the second half. A lot of the conversation, guys, was about HyunJin Ryu. Actually, Ryu is here today. Almost did not recognize him, guys. I need to get on his diet. He is looking fantastic. But he is going to pitch tomorrow in AAA Buffalo. And that puts the Blue Jays in a situation where, gosh, in 2-3 weeks, they could have 6 healthy starting pitchers, which is not a problem they have been close to having so far. Now, these things work themselves out eventually with an injury or poor performance. They always work themselves out. But that was one of the big focuses pregame, is Ryu getting to the point of his recovery where he's no longer down in Dunedin. He's no longer pitching against teenagers and trying to build back up. AAA is close to being a legitimate start. They want him out there trying to succeed, not just trying to get his velocity up. So that's going to be an interesting one. It's been a while without Ryu. He was not at his best before he went down with this injury, but still a guy who has been great in this league, and I think a pretty interesting story the last couple months.
So you never like to make a judgment on a trade, Keegan, until time passes a little bit. It's been about 7 months since the Blue Jays traded with the team they're playing tonight. Obviously, the deal that sent their best prospect, the catcher Gabriel Moreno, and Lourdes Gurriel Jr. over to Arizona to acquire Dalton Varsho. 7 months later, what's your verdict on it?
Going into that trade, I said at the time I love Varsho as a player. And if I traded Gabby Moreno, I would have trouble sleeping for probably a decade. That is the nature of trading a top 10 guy, top 10 prospect in baseball at a premium position as a catcher. And he's a guy who is such a good modern catcher. He's athletic. He can hit. He can contribute all over the field. Now, Moreno could stay as an average catcher. He could be great. He could be a perennial all-star. There is that potential in there. You're always going to have to keep one eye on that. Varsho's offense has not been where it was expected to be this year. His base running and his defense is something I've come to appreciate quite a bit more with the eye test day to day. It's really impressive. You need that offense to be there. That would be an incredible addition to this team. But a big, risky trade, and when you make risky trades, you probably peek through some fingers at your top prospects line through the season. And Moreno's shown some flashes. Not great yet, but a lot of potential there.
So Monday night when Vladdy won the Homer Derby, everybody thought that was a springboard to a great second half. Are you in that group?
Could be. I think I don't even get much involved in the swing. Is it his mechanics? Is it this or that? Vladdy, I think more than any player on this roster, more than any player I cover here, is someone who still needs the eye test a little bit. Yes, his numbers, his exit velocities, his launch angles, et cetera, have been good. The numbers haven't been there, and they only count the real numbers towards the score. How is that going to come along? I think an important part of this is a confident Vladdy who's having a good time out on the field. That is really dumbing it down, but I think earlier in the season you've seen some frustration at points, very understandable, and you have seen him trying to be someone who is not Vladdy. You've seen him reaching for pitches, trying to do a bit too much, and be that hero who turns this around. When he is relaxed, when he is having a good time, when he's carrying on with his teammates, I think that's when he's at his best, because that's when he's at his most natural. A natural Vladdy is incredibly dangerous, And if getting his head out of day-to-day batting number 3 in this lineup and hitting some homers helps with that, all the better.
Keegan, going back to Ohtani, because it's a story that just I can't get enough of. We heard Buster Olney this week talking about how if he had to pick a front runner in the race to acquire Ohtani, if indeed the Angels choose to trade him, he'd pick the Yankees, the Yankees, the Yankees. And how scary is that if you're a Blue Jays fan, considering obviously the Yankees are in contention for the playoffs, as are the Blue Jays, and the Blue Jays will play the Yankees 6 times in September. Does that freak you out a little bit if you're a Blue Jay fan?
That's got to be terrifying. Even when you talk about free agency coming up here, the Yankees, it seems, for years now, it looks like, are they too old? Are they too built on free agents that are getting injured? And then they do something else. The Rays are already enough of a headache. The Orioles as a team fascinate me. I think they are going to be a pain for years and years and years. They promote a different top 100 prospect once a week. It's incredible. But when the Yankees are being the Yankees, this division is next to impossible. So I think not just in the coming weeks, we know the Yankees love to make a splash. Cashman, Steinbrenner, my goodness, they would love to be at that press conference. We all know that. And not just this coming few weeks, but into the offseason. The Yankees are going to be tied to that. And if you are the Blue Jays, you want him in the NL Southwest, Northeast, as far as you can get away from here.
As you look at the Jays getting set to crank up after the All-Star break, I mean, there's some deficiencies in that first half, not being able to drive in runners in scoring position, some pitching woes, defensive woes, lack of being able to win in their own division. And so are they actually better than who they are right now based on correcting some of those deficiencies?
Ideally they would be if they're looking at a lot of these expected stats. I'm a big believer you are what your record is at this point of the year. And we have pointed so often, I think, guys, Vladdy is a good example of this, of his expected numbers are better. He's hitting the ball hard enough for these numbers to be better. The home runs are coming. They better come, because of all across baseball, there are teams with far less talent who are overachieving. It's possible for this to go the other way. It's possible to overachieve and surprise people. But so much of this year and a bit of last year, we've talked about a Blue Jays team that's kind of coming short of expectations, looking incredible one day, and just frustrating you like hell for a few more days. Those inconsistencies are the problem here for the Blue Jays. We know this can be a great team, but until you do it every single day, it's tough to trust that, because when you are getting into September, October, teams are shortening up their bullpens, their rotations. You are getting everybody's best. And it's so often about who's getting hot at the right time. And the Blue Jays haven't really had that hot streak yet. I think back to 2015, was it 11 straight games in August that Blue Jays team won? Where's that moment?
Yeah.
Where is a moment that lasts?
Keegan, where are you on the analytics? Because I know some of the regulars on this show would roll their eyes at the idea of expected hitting, right? Just like they roll their eyes at the idea of expected goals in hockey. Where do you sort of put that in perspective when you evaluate a player?
Yeah, I try to lean a little bit on my experience as a casual viewer of basketball and hockey. When those numbers come up, and I think, what's happening right now? Analytics in baseball, I think, could use a remodeling on its marketing job. It has been, I think, sold to a few too many people as secret math equations done in rooms here at Rogers Center. Analytics at its core is just trying to get a little bit closer to a good decision. Sometimes that can be splits. Sometimes that can be really fancy stuff, looking at how pitches break, how swings work. I think the Blue Jays, when they're looking at this, all teams use it. But when we talk about it within the context of winning and losing, early in the year, through a week, a month, if a guy is hitting 200, but the fancy stats say he should be hitting 500, I can look at that and say, sure, there is some improvement coming here. But by the middle of the season, I start to live in reality a little bit more. And if the numbers have not come, sometimes there is a reason, beyond those underlying stats. And sometimes stats are underlying for a reason. Come out and show yourself and pick it up here in the real world. And I think we'll see a bit of that. But by this point of the season, I think you need to point to what's actually happening out on the field and maybe give a little less weight to that than you would early on.
Putting aside whatever the Yankees do in acquiring Ohtani or wherever that goes, if it even goes anywhere, and understanding that Baltimore's had a great season and Tampa just is so consistent, do you see at all any drop-off in the Orioles and Rays in the second half?
I really don't. The Rays are so well built for this, and the Orioles, for my dollar, are the most interesting team in baseball right now. I really think they are. Their farm system is absolutely incredible. They have already promoted a few of these top guys. In a year or two, they'll have Jackson Holliday, who is their version of Vladdy, coming up soon. They have more they're going to promote. And if the Orioles choose to spend money, which is a massive if, I don't know if they're going to go the Blue Jays way and spend up to this level, but if they even spend a bit and get some pitching, they are a scary team for a while because they're in the sweet spot where you have star young players who are not expensive yet. That's not the most beautiful way to say it, but winning while your stars aren't expensive yet is the secret sauce here. And I think they only get more and more difficult. And if you are the Blue Jays or goodness, the Red Sox, who are really stuck in the middle, that is not good news.
So you're back at the ballpark as usual today, Keegan. Did you get a refresher during the All-Star break?
You know what? The MLB draft moving to the All-Star break, I would like to speak to whoever arranged that. But a little bit of a break. We got the draft in. I was here for a concert one night sitting in the seats, which was very disarming. But a little bit of a break. I would love the draft to be moved off of the weekend, but it was nice to be away from the noise for a few days.
Keegan, thanks for stopping by. You can have an extra hot dog on me and enjoy your night.
You got it, guys. Take care.
That's Keegan Matheson, MLB.com Blue Jays reporter. At Keegan Matheson is the Twitter account. Keegan joined us on the Maple Toyota hotline. Guy, time to build your next dream Toyota at Maple Toyota and check out Maple Toyota's pre-owned inventory arriving daily. Yes, Guy, it's time to Toyota. Visit mapletoyota.com. So plenty of stuff there to go over in what he offered. And we'll do that in the next couple of minutes. And bottom of the hour, we'll have Bev Priestman on, Canadian women's soccer head coach, reporting to us from Down Under, where the Women's World Cup is all set to start. But, I mean, he covered a lot of stuff there.
Now, were you offering to buy a dog if it was Looney Dog night, or were you going to get him a hot dog like at full retail price?
He's done a really great job, and I like chatting with him on any occasion, in any format. So I would spring for the full-price dog.
Wow.
I would. And wash it down with something that's probably triple the price of the dog.
Okay.
Yeah. He's
nice.
worth it.
He is worth it. I love Keegan. He's outstanding at what he does.
Well-rounded answer that he gives you on literally every subject. So you can see that, it was impressive what he said about Ryu. So that's another wild card here.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. No, it's fascinating to see how the Blue Jays are going to approach this, because you can make the case if you're, a little bit on the pessimistic to realistic side that you can't count on two of these guys. You can't count on Alek Manoah rediscovering whatever he's lost, and you can't count on Ryu.
Well, why would you?
Factor.
Why would you want to count on that?
Right.
Especially after, what's happened over the last couple of years where it's just not quite there. And again, it's not quite there until it shows up.
Although sometimes guys are different pitchers once they come off Tommy John, right? It's like that. They tighten up that ligament and suddenly they're throwing gas.
Yeah.
So who knows?
We don't know, but more than one insider will tell you they should also acquire another starting pitcher at the deadline just to be sure.
I completely agree. How they'll approach it is going to be fascinating because, what if Manoah is good enough, not embarrassing himself, not getting shelled on a regular basis, but occasionally getting shelled, but also putting in some respectable performances. That'll be, if he's kind of middle of the road, and then they've got, the prospect of Ryu returning, maybe that would spur them to say, let's ride with what we got.
Now that you said that, I mean, Ryu is a little more scientific, isn't it? Because it's a pitch count. You know what the injury was. It's been repaired, and there's a track record for how to handle that situation and what to look for and how to bring that along. The Manoah one is with all due respect to him, it's a question mark because you don't know when it could unravel, or I think you expect that at some point there's going to be a dip, but you don't know what the dip is and how catastrophic it could be.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you would hope that given this guy's outsized confidence and given the fact that he's been there before, as Keegan said, he's got a track record, you need to respect that. He's, guy's finished third in Cy Young voting last year. This guy is a proven major leaguer.
Yeah.
Given all that, maybe it's not implausible that he can find his way back sooner than later, but I don't know. The Florida Complex League start and the way it went before that, it just seems like he was in a wilderness, with no way out. And the idea that one good start or one respectable start in Detroit is enough to sort of give him the green flag and, yeah, you're part of the rotation again, it just seems premature.
Bit of skepticism follows the recovery there. No question about that. Mail It In Friday is brought to you by Boston Pizza. Weekends are better than fish bowls and frosty pints in the BP patio. They're better with fish bowls and frosty pints in the BP patio. I don't know what I said, but let's get it right. Grab your sunscreen. Let's have a weekend. See you at the BP patio. Yes, guy. This is OverDrive on TSN 2 and TSN 1050. Oh, yes, guy. That's Friday. That's Friday music. Mail It In Friday music right there. Stomping.
Love it.
Absolutely. So, Jim Tatti and Dave Feschuk with you, subbing for the regulars on Mail It In Friday. We stayed last night after the broadcast. The Grappler stayed with us. JP stayed with us because we wanted to talk to Bev Priestman, Canadian women's soccer head coach, because the World Cup starts next Thursday, Canada against Nigeria. All this stuff on TSN and CTV. We had been, because of her schedule and the time difference, we had to record this. So you'll see different wardrobe on the both of us if you're keeping score at home. So we started the interview talking with Bev, and this is in Australia and New Zealand, so there's a bit of travel, and we wondered if that made a difference in her preparation.
Yeah, I think, being from North America, we used to travel and, even internally, it does remind us a little bit like the flight time and everything, but I think we did the trip out here in August. We got used to the jet lag and some strategies, and I think for the players not to be experiencing that, going into a World Cup for the first time, it was a big part of our planning. So, yeah, I mean, it's nothing new getting on a 5-hour flight to get to the other side of the country. It's probably what we're used to.
Bev, we had Janine Beckie in the studio this week at some point, and we were talking about how it's kind of a curious thing about your program that you've had so much success at the Olympics with obviously the gold in Tokyo that you're coming off of and the 2 bronzes that preceded that. And yet you haven't been able to break through in the same way at the World Cup tournament. You had the 4th place finish in 2003, and it's been difficult to get farther than that since. What to you is the difference between these 2 tournaments? I know the length is different, but what has sort of kept Canada from having the same kind of success at the World Cup than they have at the Olympics?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say specifically, but we did do a whole World Cup research project about, what we've done in the past approaching World Cups. Obviously I went in 2019 with England. And I think there's something around freshness and a longer turnaround between games and how you manage the energy so that when it really matters, the players are just as fresh as they would be. I think I worked it out. Our round of 16 game is probably where we picked up that gold medal. And so it's a long haul tournament. And so everything we've done is designed around freshness and longer days between, because I think that is a big part of not being dead by the time it really matters.
And from what you can see in the workouts and from conversation, do you feel that that's been a positive effect? And can you see this thing moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, listen, as you know, in tournament football, anything can happen on its day. And I think in the women's game right now, particularly European nations in top 10, anybody could win a game. I don't think now it's a given that, let's say, a US, is going to go and be crowned champions, which I think, 6-7 years ago, that was a given. There was a trend there. I think right now the women's game is closer and tighter than it's ever been. So it's going to be, on your day, but I do believe this team, on their day and turning up can go all the way, and we have to believe that. And, I think the preparation camp we've balanced, making sure the players do feel a little bit where they can unplug when they're not on the pitch and just trying to get the balance right in everything we do in a day. So we're not, burning them out too early. As I've said, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint, and getting that bit right is critical.
Bev, obviously, when you haven't been having the great success that the women's team has had on the field, and obviously the men's team has had on the pitch, there's been less than success off the field with Canada Soccer. Been some, unfortunate stories about the turmoil of the off-the-field organization. I know the players on your team are still in negotiations around a contract. What's the level of challenge for you as a coach to help these players compartmentalize and keep those distractions that are very real off the field out of sort of seeping onto the field?
Yeah, I think that was the difficult part for me in February. Very much was real. It was, it was draining both staff, players. Yeah, the emotions were running high. I think coming into this camp, it felt very focused. And I think I very much kept everything to business and, knowing they're going on in the background. But I do think there's a willingness from both parties, Canada Soccer and the players, to get this over the line. And I know there's been those discussions happening, but it very much hasn't felt that that's impacted us in terms of our preparation and on the field.
In terms of sort of getting this team prepared, Bev, what was the challenge in even picking it? Because I understand it was quite a difficult team to come to a final roster 23 for you.
Yeah, listen, I think we've obviously had, like a lot of teams, a lot of injuries and significant long-term injuries. The players were just returned. You look at Diane Rose, Michelle Prince and Desiree Scott, who didn't make the final roster. That's been the challenge. I think any coach coming into a preparation camp for a World Cup, you would want to come with your 23, get rid of all that clutter and push on. But I knew I had to wait as long as I could to make that final roster. So I think the whole of 2023 we've not had, and to be honest, large parts of 2022, we've not had a full roster available to us. And I think for the first time, it's not a full roster. We've obviously missing Janine, Desiree Scott, and now Jade Rose. But I think to just have a little bit more depth and some returning players with significant experience, albeit they might not be able to be 90-minute players or key starters, I think just to have that available really lifts the squad. And that's been a big challenge of trying to get partnerships on the pitch when players haven't been there, we've been putting people out of position, all those sorts of things. It's been quite nice this camp to just push forward.
So all this starts next Thursday night, our time, against Nigeria. You're in with Nigeria, Ireland, and Australia. That's a tough group. What do you think of it?
Yeah, I think, our group, I would say every other group you look at, there's almost a given game without taking anything for granted. And I think in our group, you've that middle game in Ireland, they defend deep, 5-4-1, very, very difficult to break down. I think every team, every top 10 nation that's played them found the same thing. So that's, people on the outside could say, oh, well, that's a given game. But that's a difficult game. And then we know what Nigeria and Australia are like. So it's a difficult group. But at the end of the day, I think to be the best, you've got to beat the best. And that's going to set us up nicely if we get out of that group to then go and play some top teams because we've been tested all the way through that group stage. Yeah,
you sort of got into this, but with those three teams that you're playing, do they play differently? Do you have to sort of reconfigure things to play them, or is it basically the same game?
Yeah. No, I think all three are very, very different. Nigeria is going to be more transition. There's man marking set-ups. Ireland beat a really deep block and be good at set plays. And then Australia, I think they've really hit a stride. You've seen they recently beat England 2-0. So they've really come together. And obviously a home nation, that's going to bring its own challenges. So all three games are going to bring different problems. And I think my focus and my message into the group is we have to do what we do really well and fine-tune that. And that's what we've been putting attention on. But obviously there's tweaks and things as to what we need to do for different opposition. So that's going to be the balancing act of if you over-focus on the opposition, you lose your own identity, but at the same time just being equipped and ready to roll with whatever they bring.
Bev, you guys won the gold medal in Tokyo, but you didn't score a lot of goals. 6 goals in 6 matches. With Janine Beckie now come over to the dark side here at TSN to do a little broadcasting when she recovers from her ACL. She was one of your more reliable people around the net. How are you going to score goals or enough goals to get this over the line?
Yeah, I think, at the end of the day, what we have to make sure is that we have a clean sheet mindset, because when you don't score a lot, you definitely can't concede a lot. But I do think we have evolved. If I look in CONCACAF and 2022, we were scoring, from different positions. I think Tokyo was very much a forward line or penalty kicks if we get a goal. But I think where we've evolved now, the set pieces have got better, so you get defenders scoring. We've had midfielders in Jesse Fleming, scoring in open play. So that's going to be the balancing act. Do I expect us to beat teams 3-4-0 every game? No. But at the end of the day, if we can keep a clean sheet, defend excellently, and work on our attack, which is what we've been doing. There's no reason why we can't be beating teams and rather than relying on penalty kicks.
Probably should have brought up Christine Sinclair earlier in the conversation, but we'll do that now. I mean, this is probably her last shot here, and just if you could speak to how she's doing, her role on this team, and how vital she is to what happens.
Yeah, I think, Christine, there's been a lot of talk or a lot of questions asked of me, like, what's her role? Is she starting? Is she finishing? Minutes. I think ultimately my job is to pick the best 11 to help us win. And so far, I think what you've seen from this team is Christine's been a big part of that. And coming into camp, she seems, she's flying, she's hungry. And when someone knows this could be their last World Cup, I think you get something else from them in terms of enjoying the experience. That'll be our sixth. And I think for any young kid in the team, it's like they get to experience possibly the last World Cup with a Canadian great, and that's quite unique as well. So, yeah, I think Christine will be a pivotal part on the pitch, off the pitch, massive experience, and just has an aura about her in terms of when you're in that tunnel and you're about to go into your opening game of a World Cup and that pressure. Someone's done that 6 times over, and, it just has a level of class in the way that she plays, and I think that's something that we're very lucky to have on this team.
On the other end of that age spectrum, Bev, you chose Olivia Smith, an 18-year-old from Toronto area, to be a member of this team. What's the idea there, and what kind of contribution can a player with so little experience make in your mind?
Yeah, I think Olivia, the good news is she's developed in our youth system, and they play the same way as us, have the same philosophy, and was recently at qualifiers and, fully understands the way that we play, which is very easy to make you could say, a big call on such a young player at that age. However, there's not a lot of risk associated with that because she just gets what we do. What I would say is she's come into camp and you wouldn't look an inch out of place. And I think in many ways nobody expected her to make this squad, but I just felt with Deanne and Michelle coming back in the mix, Olivia brings a totally different profile. And I know that in 2024, 2027, if she continues on the route that she has, she can be a massive, player for this team. I think what's held her back has been her fitness. She's gone away and worked hard and ultimately has earned every part of the spot that she's made in this team.
Bev, when you don't score a lot of goals, you need to keep them out of your net. And, of course, for many years, you had Stephanie Labbé to handle that for you. She was a big part of your win in Tokyo, and she's since retired. What's your level of confidence in her heir apparent here in Caitlyn Sheridan?
Listen, Caitlyn, you've seen, she can make saves that I've not seen saves happen. In training, she does that daily, and so she's a massive part for this team. Obviously, relatively young and inexperienced, had a rich youth system, but was her number 2 behind Steph, and very closely missed out to the Olympic starting sort of goalkeeper role. So yeah, Caitlyn's going to be great. She brings energy to the group, leadership, but ultimately keeps the ball out of the back of the net. And I think we asked what a goalkeeper's there to do. She certainly does that.
Bev, thanks for your time. All the best.
All right. Thank you very much. Take care.
Well, exciting times ahead. It all starts Thursday night, Canada against Nigeria, and all the action on TSN and CTV. Coming up at the top of the hour, Richard Griffin will stop by. We're going to talk baseball with him, talking CFL with Matt Dunnigan at the bottom of the next hour. This is Overdrive on TSN 2 and TSN 1050. Oh, yes, Guy, that's frolicking music on Overdrive. Jim, Tatti, Dave Feschuk with you on Mail It In Friday. So once in a while during a commercial break, I'll play this little mental gymnastics game, and I just did a Yahtzee. So I was thinking about the Blue Jays, and I thought, well, we're talking about the weekend series, and then as we were talking with Keegan Matheson, I thought, well, so 5 guys in the rotation, so let's go through the rotation 3 times and see where we end up. And where we end up is Sunday, July 30th.
Okay.
Day before the trade deadline.
Oh.
And the day before you open a series against Baltimore at home, 4 games, and then you go to Boston for 3. I mean, talk about timing. Because if you go through that rotation 3 more times, you're going to have some sort of a sense of where Manoah is. The Ryu situation will be on its own track, but that's, as we said earlier, that's more scientific. But that's a pretty good indication of over the next 17 days, you'll be able to figure out where this is tracking and what you need to do about it.
Yeah, you're going to figure out maybe you need a bat. Maybe you need somebody to cash in some runs. If you can't get out of doldrums that you're in with runners in scoring position, maybe you need somebody that can come in and be a contributor on that front. And to your point, maybe you need another arm if Manoah can't carry the weight of the fifth starter. We got Ryu now. I guess they've announced that he's going to start in AAA tomorrow. So Ryu's on his way back.
Yeah.
He's starting with Buffalo tomorrow.
But he's on a predictable track in terms of usage and innings and pitch count. That's a that's a gradual ramp up. And the reason I love that whole theory about the next 15 games or 17 days is, as they said, you come home, you've got 4 against Baltimore and 3 in Boston. You cannot lose. You cannot be on the short end of those 7 games. You have to be at least 4-3, maybe 5-2 in those 7 games.
Well, you got to improve on your in-division record, which is right now 7 wins and 20 losses against the AL East, which is not ideal, obviously.
No, but it's all mapped out there. I kind of like when you can present that, or if you're in a front office and you're looking at your projections, when you can look at all that and see that you've got 15 games, which is exactly 3 spins through the rotation.
Yeah.
And then you end up with a day before the trade deadline. I mean, there's something to work with there if need be.
Do you sense the urgency? I feel like there's a bit of urgency this year because...
Well, there should be.
Yeah, there should be, because you spent a lot of money. You got one of the highest payrolls in baseball. You've got this team that's right there. It's on the edge of being a very good team, and may well be a great team. Who knows? The playoffs are yet to come. And then you've got the prospect that Steve Phillips brought up on the show earlier in the week about this thing ain't forever. Vlad Guerrero Jr., Bo Bichette, they'll be free agents in 2025 if you don't do something about it.
I hate to reference the Leaf story, but
yeah,
when you signed the 4 guys and added Morgan Riley to that, that's the core. You need to build around the core and win. You don't need to just watch the core.
Right. So the point being, all the fuss about Ohtani and the idea that they're going to get Ohtani. Okay, I understand. You're not the New York Yankees. You're not going to maybe spend what you need to spend. Maybe you don't have the prospect capital to get it done. Who knows? But maybe you got to get more than one thing here. Maybe you got to get a bat and a pitcher. Maybe you got to go all in here, because
I would agree
how many
with
swings
that.
do you get?
I would agree with that. I think you need to bring in a bat, somebody for defensive purposes, and a pitcher or 2, starter and a reliever maybe. I mean, these are insurance policy guys that you need, because you just don't want to come up short.
Right. You don't want to come up short, and you feel like when you look at the successful bullpens, through recent playoff history, they've had maybe more swing and miss stuff than the Blue Jays have right now. I mean, Jordan Romano accepted. You look at, and you just don't know about the starting rotation outside of, when it comes to Manoah, when it comes to Ryu, you're not sure what you got there. So,
but when we get into the starters, I always qualify this, because when you're in the playoffs, you have a starter, you want 5, 6 out of him. Then you're going to the bullpen.
Right.
He's not going to pitch a complete game.
No, it's not happening very often anymore, is it?
No, it's 5 or 6, and then your bullpen takes over. So I would add, I mean, it's great to say if you added a starting pitcher, just in case the 2 rehabbing guys don't work out, but that's not gonna cut it in the playoffs.
It's amazing how the urgency kind of creeps up on you, though, right? Because
that's from a couple of years of coming close.
Right. Coming close.
So who decides? I guess we know who decides, but when is it the time?
Right.
When is it all in time, or does it ever happen, or do you just keep sort of rearranging things in hopes of?
Well, that's the thing.
Out.
Like when you get the vibe from Mark Shapiro and Ross Atkins, they talk a lot about sustainable contention, right? Being a sustainable operation. You remember the way you go way back to their arrival in Toronto, and there was always that the urban legend or true statement that they were chiding Alex Anthopoulos for going all in, and liquidating prospects in the famous moves that got the Blue Jays to the playoffs in 2015 and 2016, right? And
I think that's what the marketplace demanded.
Yeah, I think
that's what people
those
wanted.
of us who lived through the marketplace, they had the longest playoff drought in
Yeah.
North American pro sports, going back to Joe Carter and the back-to-back World
Touch 'em all,
Series.
Joe.
Yeah. And you're right. Those of us who lived through it and watched this team languish and not make the playoffs all those years, I think a lot of people were like, yes, Alex, you've read the market correctly. This was the moment. You had to make this happen. And so you made the deal for, Tulowitzki, you made the deal for David Price, and the rest is history. But if it wasn't necessarily sustainable, right? Like,
No, but, I guess that's the grand question of what is the business plan?
Right.
You want to be close every year, or do you want to pull a Raptors, manage your assets, win, and then suffer after? What is the correct answer?
You can say suffer, but Masai Ujiri ain't suffering. He got one of the richest executive contracts in the history of pro sports.
I mean the fan base.
Yeah.
So I mean, and not really suffering in the Raptors case, just not. Obviously, you can't. Humpty Dumpty fell. Can't put it back together again.
Yeah. Oh, they were trying there for a while, but you're right.
Well, then that's obligatory, right? We won, so we have to try and I have to make the effort. You can't liquidate. We've seen that happen before.
Yes.
And we won the championship. Everybody's gone.
Well,
we're starting over. Everybody's gone.
Sometimes a lack of sentimentality can be a really good trait as a sports executive.
Yeah. Well, that's the grand question. We'll finish off the hour with that. What do you want from your sports team? I think you want credibility and you want to try, and you'd like at some point for them to roll the dice, right?
On the other hand, if Vladdy doesn't start hitting, like if Vladdy doesn't, as Keegan said, if Vladdy doesn't start putting the expected hitting numbers into on-field hitting, it might be all for naught anyways.
Well, we end on a question. This is OverDrive on TSN 2 and TSN 1050.